Welcome to today's class in computer science. In our previous class, we looked at computer system, like the overview of computer system, where we introduced what a computer is. We defined what a computer is. We looked at the hardware and the software. We also looked at the characteristic of a computer system. So in our class today, we'll be looking at data and information. Now, this session is being recorded for absent students, for those of us that are not online. By the end of this class, you'll be able to define data and information. You'll be able to differentiate between data and information. Then lastly, you'll be able to illustrate the data processing cycle. Now, starting from the definition of data, I believe we've all heard about the word. This is not the first time you're hearing about data. You've heard about data probably online with friends or people around talking about data. You hear about companies collecting data, asking for your data and things like that. So question is, how do we define data? What basically is data? Now, as we all know the definition of data are raw facts and figure that are not processed. That is, they are facts or figures that are not organized. They've not been processed to actually give meaning. I don't know if we are clear with the definition. So they are just basic facts. Okay, for example, now I could just call a name of a person. For example, I could say John, or I can say 29 years, or I could just say 5. Or okay, going to where you want to fill a form, you're asked to input 1 or 2 information. It could be your name, your surname, your middle name, your age. Now all these are data they are collecting from you. So basically data is just like, okay, this input that you're giving a computer, you're entering your name is data, you're entering your surname, it is data. So all these are called data. So from definition here we say data are raw facts and figures, unprocessed, unorganized fact, concept or instruction. Now let's look at the characteristic of a data. Now a data has no inherent meaning alone. It is the input. For example, now, okay, we have using the flour or raw ingredients. We have the flour, the sugar, the oil in the bowl. To make things more easy, we could just say, okay, using just like I use the form when you're filling a form online. Let's say you're registering for your Facebook, your WhatsApp. Now the data required are your name, your surname, your age, your email address. Now all these are data. They're collecting it, because at that point they are not actually organized. They are just different raw facts, because we all know that this is your name, we all know that this is your age, but we don't know much about you, just the name. So that's what it means. And just like I said, it is the input you give to your computer. Now let's use the diagram to illustrate what a data is. So a data can be a list of random numbers. It can be your name, just like I said, or your date. Now using this figure, this is a collected data of individuals, where we have the first name, the last name, the city, then the random formula. So all these are collected by probably the website you visit, or maybe your school collects it for to be stored in the database. So all these are called data, because it doesn't have meaning yet. Like, we don't know the use of these names, we don't know why these names are here, what do they do, why are they on this sheet. Now, that is to answer this question, that is where information comes in. Now, with information, basically, information is data that has been processed, organized, and structured. So basically, from your data that has been collected, the names they collected, the age they collected, your location, your email address, and things like that, why do you collect it? So now, information answered those questions. Information that they are meaningful and useful. So basically, for example, now, after collecting your name and your surname, so if I decide to, let's say, assign maybe a role to you based on your name, maybe I can say John is a boy, something like that. So basically, that's an information, because we know that, okay, you're a boy. Or if I say John is a computer analyst, or okay, give me another name. We could use Popola is a data scientist, or Popola is a web developer. So basically, you can see that, okay, we've actually have a data with the name, then it's giving a meaning, because we know, okay, Popola is a web developer. So that is just the meaning of information. At that point, it has meaning. Now, checking the characteristic, now we said information has meaning and is relevant. It is the output. For example, if I collect the number, okay, let's take an example of a spreadsheet now, where your exam scores are being entered. If I have only the scores of each subject without the total, then all I just have is just your data. For example, I can have the data for the score of your, maybe for computer science, now I can have the score of your first test, second test. Now, to make it information is when I actually calculate all these, give it a total, and at that point it's become information, because I know that, okay, based on this, I can deduce meaning from that information. That is, now the total score now for each of these subjects now becomes the information, because based on what the data have been given, I've deduced an information, which is what the total of your score, which can help me to give you your grade, either to give you A, B, C, D, E, or F. Then from there, after summing everything together, then I can give you a position based on the data I have. So I don't know if this explanation is clear. Now, the analogy is a finished cake baked and ready to consume. So based on the previous analogy I gave, we already have the oil, everything on ground. Now, at that point, you have not done anything. So when you finish mixing all the oil, this flour and everything together, the output, the end product, is basically your information. So at that case, we have what is a cake. Sorry about that. So now we have, for the virtual, we have a final calculated average score. Now this is the sample, just like what I said. This is the final score on final grade. So now, given the data here, we have the midterm has a score, has a maximum possible score, which is 8915%. So now the information here is the final grade, because based on this given data, we have all this data together. We know that, okay, this is the weight, this is the final grade, and with that we can be able to make decision based on the data we have on ground. Then now let's look at the difference between data and information. For data, we said, for the form, we said data are raw facts, they are unorganized, just like we saw on the sheet. Now they don't actually have meaning. They are just there, you just collected it, we don't know what it's used for. So then we have information. Information is redefined, it is organized, it has meaning. Then okay, here we say no meaning, context. Or then for the information is meaningful and it is useful. Then for the dependency, data does not depend on information, because data is what is collected. Truth is, without data you cannot have information. but without information you can actually use data, because it's from data you get information. So that information depends on data. Now moving on, focus points. Processing is the bridge between the two. So okay, what it means is that when you have an input and in order to get the information, there need to be a processing. So for example, now in order to calculate the sum, let's say, of your score, now there needs to be a processing that will going on, that is like, okay, add the addition, which will now add all the scores together before it produces the output. That is what the processing is all about. So this is the data processing cycle that I mentioned. So the 3 steps involved for data processing, we have the input, the process, and the output. So definitely you need to have this data on ground, and like I said, this is the input. For example, if you want to calculate the total of, let's say, the score, now using the score, now definitely you have to give the scores for each of the subjects and each of the tests and each of the assignments, each of the examination scores has to be there. The processing comes in when you have to manipulate it. You add up all the scores together, then it will generate the output. So for example, press call on mobile phone. You want to make your call, you need to press a call, then when you press the call to connect to your network, maybe MTN, Glo, regardless of the network using. Then from there, the phone will now connect with your friend. So you can see this is a perfect example of this process, the data processing cycle. So they need to enter information, it processes it, then it gives out the result. So example here, we have input data. Let's assume we have the head. You can see a perfect example now. The input data we have, let's assume your score is 7 first test, second score you have 5, third score you have 8, and the last score you have 10. So these are your test score. Now the processing is where you calculate the total. Now when you give it operation, you tell the computer to sum, to add and divide to get the average. Now the output is the information whereby the computer will process it. It will add each of these number, then divide it by the total, then it will give you the average. So that will be your output, because based on this output I can actually give you your sorry, based on this output and this information I can tell if your position is first, you'll be having the first position, second position, and things like that. So just like I said, it helps us to make decision. Information makes us have decision. Why input is just the raw fact, it's just there, it doesn't have relevance or meaning, it doesn't give meaning. Now the visual we have here is a simple 3-stage, and which is what I just displayed now. That is the 3-stage of the flow. So this is a flowchart diagram. This is how the data processing cycle actually looks like. First of all, we have the input, then we have the process, then we have the output. So this is just the example. Now let's look at the career. How do we apply? How does data information in our daily life in different field, how does it work? So for example, and in the medical aspect, now we have the doctor's decision for the healthcare that is in the healthcare facility. Now the scenario is that, okay, let's assume a patient visits a hospital. Now what are the data that is being collected? The data is collected is the temperature. They ask for your temperature, they ask for your blood pressure, the symptoms, what is wrong with you, things like that. So all these things that they are asking are just your data. Then the information derived is just basically based on this data provided. They know your temperature. If your temperature is high, your blood pressure is high, the symptoms, there's cough, there's heat, your cold, and things like that. So based on this data, now they can actually give you, that is the diagnosis. Now they can prescribe drugs that you can take. They can actually tell you what is wrong with you and things like that. So at that point, those are the information now that you need. Now the key takeaway is raw reading or raw data must be organized and interpreted to save a life. So when you have data that is not being interpreted, it doesn't have meaning. Remember what I said when I said organized and interpreted, means it must give you meaning. Like, okay, based on this that I have, what meaning can I bring? Can I use it to generate maybe the total of a score? Can I use it to know the number of people that come to my hospital? Can I use it to know the age? For example, okay, for age now, the data we need for age to get someone's age now is your date of birth. Once I have your date of birth, I can deduce your age and things like that. Now, what else? And there are so many examples though. So basically, that is just the difference between data and information. I don't know if we are clear with this or we have any questions. So please, if there's any confusion or any question, please let me know on our platform. Just send out your questions, and on the platform I will take our time to answer, to give us feedback and answers. So now, in conclusion, data is very potential. Data is very important in our everyday life, in every field, in any field that is regarded, because without data we cannot make decisions based on what we want from probably a person, individual, or a thing that we actually need a solution on. Now, information is the result. Every great career is built on acting on good information. So basically, you need good information, and just like I said, data is the potential and information is the result. So data is needed to give out information. Then I don't know if this is clear, but just like I said, if there's any confusion, if there's any question, you can write it down on the platform, then I will try as much as possible to respond to our questions. So basically, that will be all for today's class. Now, note we have an assignment which I want every one of us to attempt and try as much as possible to submit it before the next class. And like I said, the format of our submission is either you type it on a computer and save it as a document or as a PDF, then use the link provided to submit it, or you can write it down on a note, maybe on your paper or your book, or just look for a book. You can write it out, then snap it with your phone, then you will scan it. Preferably a scanner, because when you scan it, it will not be blur. There is this application, in case you're using a phone, there's this application they call Scam Scanner. So you could actually download it on your Android phone, then use it to scan the notes, then save it as image or as PDF, but preferably a PDF, but whichever one that is convenient for you, then you send it to the link. Please don't send it to the platform, just there's a link provided, send it to the link. So this is your assignment: list one real-world data input and resulting information output, just like the way we did it in medicine now. So look for another field, maybe engineering, banking, or whichever field that is of interest to you. Then try to see how data and input information are related, how they can input data, and from that data they can deduce information. So that will be your assignment, and please, let's try as much as possible to attempt it and submit it before the end of next week. Thank you very much. See you in our next class.